evening we're going to have a pretty casual conversation about what it means to be a multi-hyphenate creative, to have a day gig, a night hustle, and sort of like balance the two and like keep yourself sane in between. So thanks for joining us. We're going to jump into it. We're going to sit.
That was so official.
Oprah's my idol. I guess let's just start with like some icebreaker conversation. Yeah.
What's an icebreaker?
Are you
on?
Can you?
Hello?
Okay. All right. Christine, tell us a bit about how you got into your career, your day hustle. I guess we'll start with your day hustle. Tell us about what you do from 9 to 5.
All right. So my 9 to 5, I work as an experiential designer at an ad agency. But I did not come from that in any capacity. Like, I didn't study that or anything. I came from nightlife. So I threw parties, which then I realized I can't stay up till 5 in the morning, like every single night. So I kind of like spiraled out of that into more art-centric projects, doing runway shows, putting on art exhibitions, starting to manage artists on the side. And then my current boss now, she's the director of experiential, but she kind of picked me up and was like, let me mentor you and teach you processes and how to build decks. And so 2 years later, she kind of like pushed me into a career path that I've found some growth in. So like, I'm a technical producer, so I'm behind the scenes. I'm the one who writes scripts for all the lighting designers and sound, and doing like full scripts for like an event with 2 Chainz or Future. So she kind of like pushed me in a path that I did not expect, which is really cool. So that's more my 9 to 5 right now.
And Angela, tell us a bit about how you got your start in the food world and have sort of now transitioned into your role at the Standard.
Yeah.
I guess maybe start with life back out west.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All the way back. So I'm from California, but I've been living in New York for 11 years. I've always wanted to be a chef since I was a child, and so I moved out to New York to pursue that option. I originally, when I first moved to New York, I started working for a female chef, and I found that really inspiring. It never really felt like I couldn't succeed in the food industry as a female person. That was not something that I thought about a lot, and that's a question I think I get a lot in food media. What's it like to be a female chef? And I felt really lucky that I didn't focus too much on that question, because my first mentors were women chefs. And so I felt really confident at a really young age that it was a hustle that I could actually succeed in. When I first moved to New York, I was about 20, and I started doing just like baking and working at a cafe. But then at night, when the cafe would close, I started a catering company. So I would do really cute little catering events at places like Alvin Ailey Theater, and just sell like crudité, or serve crudité and like cool cupcakes, like sage cupcakes, at a young age, and make like $600. And I felt really, I felt like rich as a 20-year-old. And so I just kept continuing that hustle, and really liked the idea of moving to restaurants so that I could work with more expensive ingredients and more high-end ingredients and learn from different chefs. And so that was really empowering too, because the restaurant that I ended up working with, Vinegar Hill House, that was also helmed by a female chef, and we just got along really well, and she showed me everything. And I was like a tiny pipsqueak, but she let me work and play with everything. I was happy to just weigh out meat in the basement, but instantly she brought me upstairs to work on the line, which I totally wasn't qualified for. But I ended up working with a lot of people that were older than me. I didn't tell anyone really how old I was, and I started running the line. And a lot of people thought I was maybe 10 years older than I actually was, because I was just really serious about it. And then I eventually moved on to work at Mission Chinese Food, which I did for the past 6 years, which was really huge, because that allowed me to think more creatively about cooking. And that's when I started working more collaboratively with different artists and designers and activists and farmers. And so now that brings me to my weird new job that I have. I'm the creative director for food and culture for the Standard International, which just sort of happened because the CEO was interested in all the weird design projects I was doing and collaborative projects I was doing. So it's not a job that exists anywhere else, and because it was made for me, I can kind of play around with what that means. But it sort of lands me to where I am now. I just started 5 weeks ago, and so I'm sort of creating what my dialogue is with a company and what my narrative might be as we go through it.
I want to dive back into that, but just immediately, since we're riffing and speaking casually, I'm noticing that in both of your careers, there were women who proved to be pivotal and who kind of like put you in a role that you probably hadn't thought yourself were ready for, and you just kind of like had to rise to the occasion. I guess, can you speak a bit more about the importance of like females who've like mentored and guided you along the way? And I don't know, and do you give that back to anyone else? You know, is that something that you want to pay forward?
Yeah, I think skill sharing and just seeing the potential in someone, or like having someone like, come with me, just trust me, let's do this. I think that's been so pivotal in my life, where I remember doing my first runway show, and like there was another producer and they're like, where's the run-a show? And I was like, what is a run-a show? And just like literally learning on the spot, like it was literally just learning through doing, and people just gave me opportunities to just learn. And I think those opportunities kind of opened doors, and that curiosity to continue want to build my skills, but also sharing it out to other people, I think is really important to be a mentor and like continue that and be excited, and that enthusiasm, like, yeah, you can do it, is really good. And that's how like these communities, creative communities, kind of ripple out into the next generation, and even like generations beyond us that are like, oh, I want to get into this, and they might be older. So I think just that sharing is very nurturing in our community.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely the woman that I view as my chief mentor was the head chef and owner of Vinegar Hill House. Her name is Jean Adamson. She always gave me advice about cooking, but also was just a cool person, someone that I like would want to go to the movies with. And I think that really matters with who you want to take on as a mentor or a mentee. And something I think that's really important about this type of mentorship too is that it's usually, I feel like in my experience, it's something that's decided with those two people, and that conversation happens and it's acknowledged, and then you move forward and you're like, okay, you're my mentor and you're my mentee. But over the years, I realized too that it doesn't have to be this situation where like you are someone's contemporary or there has to be an age difference. I realized that through a lot of the friendships that I have, there's a lot of like co-mentorship that happens, and I think that's something new that I think of. I had a line cook that worked for me, who I really love, that I think she was one of those people that also just didn't tell anyone her age. I think she was like in her 40s, but she just looked super young. And we definitely had this feeling of, she told me eventually that she viewed me as her mentor, but I viewed her in life skills as a mentor as well. So we would talk about our friendship and work relationship as being co-mentoring. And then I've had, more traditional routes of that, where I had an employee that worked for me that she was working as a bar back and begged me to be a cook. And I was like, I don't have the bandwidth right now to take you on as a project. But we just got along really well and ended up happening. And now she's in ways surpassed some projects, like the idea of linearly, like what a chef might do. She opened up her own restaurant and is running a really successful restaurant in Hudson in New York, in upstate. If any of you guys have been to maybe Little Deb's, she runs a really successful restaurant up there and has her own community. They're definitely a queer restaurant. They're doing it out there. I feel like that was something that was really important to me when I was running my own restaurant, to acknowledge that the restaurant I was running was queer. And she had simultaneously been doing that in her own micro community, because restaurants can be that, a micro community and representative of like how you want to live your life outside of the restaurant. She had done that really successfully, and they're very known for that. And I think, so it's important to have, it's always been ingrained in me to almost coincidentally think about female mentorship. But again, I think the ideas of mentorship for me have sort of changed in that it could just be a peer friend as well. That's like Christina was just schooling me on how I could have a ticketing tier system for events, and I haven't thought of that. So I feel like that's something that's really current as well, that we can think about our friendships that way.
So as you mentioned, having your restaurant present as sort of a queer restaurant in a queer space, what does that mean down to like the logistics of running a space? How do you have the restaurant inhabit that spirit?
Yeah, I mean, that's not something that is easy to do by any means. I think what I mean when I mention Hannah, who is someone I've mentored, she's successfully done that at a deep core. Every single person in that space agrees and wants to run the restaurant that way, and they're very diverse ethnically. Like they've all have a very it has its pros and cons, because then everyone's a little too close, but everyone has a lot of the same core values. At a large restaurant, that was something that I vied for because it was important to me. However, at a large restaurant that's 130 seats, I don't get to have deeply personal relationships with every single employee. So it's a lot of maintenance. So it might mean, a new busser that comes in doesn't know about the language that we're trying to use at the restaurant. If I'm trying to show that we want to use more gender neutral pronouns, things like that, it's constant maintenance. But I think where we were most successful at it, say at Mission, was when I finally had a general manager, so someone leading the front of the house that was also someone that had the same core values as me, and it had to take her also being a person of color and also someone that identified as being queer for us to just move quickly towards that, because otherwise I've gotten myself in situations where I'm having to teach somebody what it's like and pinpoint their classism or them being like classist or racist, and then it's a lot of emotional labor, but sometimes it's worth it. It's just not always successful. So it's a lot of labor, basically, and that's something that I vocalized because that was important to me and the community that I was trying to create. So it's just constant manicuring.
And in terms of curating culture and community, tell us about your work with Disc Women and sort of like who runs it. It's three of you. Mm-hmm. Who does what? What's your mission? Like, tell us all about it.
Cool. So in a nutshell, so Disc Women is a platform that we started 4 years ago in a space called Bossa Nova Civic Club in Bushwick. It's a very small, intimate club, but myself, Frankie, and Emma, we all met there in different capacities. And we just wanted to do a 2-day showcase where 12 women-identified DJs donated their time to play, and we donated the proceeds to the Sadie Nash Leadership Project. So a lot of it was people donating their time, and then we donated proceeds. That was kind of the model that we started, and we were like, all right, it's a one-off little thing, cool. And then kind of snowballed into all these cities reaching out and wanting to do it in their spaces. But over time, like 6 months later, we were like, okay, like what's happening? Like, what are we gonna do with this? And we really wanted to get artists paid, have women actually be compensated for their work and really infiltrate the infrastructure of music. So having more decision makers behind the scenes, diverse decision makers, booking agents, working with women venues, really disrupting that is how we wanted to change the scene. And so we started our agency. So Disc Women has an agency, and then we have like our brand is how I kind of divide the two. So the agency, it's myself and Frankie who run the day-to-day operations. So we have like 12 artists that we have signed to our roster officially. They're based all over the world. So Berlin, Lisbon, Philly, New York, Toronto, DC. But yeah, so really the whole thing, it's like we run it like a proper agency. People can eventually transition to being full-time musicians, which is really cool to see their growth, just from being like a little side thing that they do after working like a coffee shop to them like producing like and playing festivals. So that's been kind of crazy to see that growth over 4 years. But yeah, in a nutshell, it's really, we're in the process of just like scaling the business, and I'm very much behind the scenes. So I'm the person who's like making decisions of what banking are we using to, like, what's our QuickBooks look like to, can we afford to hire employees? Can we have this intern transition to a paid position? So those are all things that I work with Frankie day to day. And then Emma is our artist. So she's our like proof of concept basically, but she's like never in town. Like literally me, Frankie, and Emma are all on different continents like right now, just like working. So yeah, we're all like in Slack and like we don't have an office, but we're trying to find an office. So it's interesting just like in that growth period of just like the hustle, which is my side project on my 9 to 5, but I'm literally like at my desk, like slacking at the same time, like, all right, let's do this. So yeah, it's a balance of all those things, as well as like having touring artists and managing like all their logistics of like, all right, you're flying to Barcelona today. Okay, cool. This is your hotel. Bye. So yeah.
So prior to working with The Wing, I worked at The Fader, which is primarily like a music, arts, and culture magazine. And I feel like every year or every couple of months, it's like, here are the top 5 female DJs. And I think the media tends to constantly sort of like pigeonhole, like, and also pigeonhole, but also like lift up a handful of like female DJs and sort of like neglect the rest. Like they pick some favorites, usually influencers, and like the DJs who are like doing like back-to-back gigs in Bushwick might not get that shine. How do you feel about the perception of, you know, the landscape of female DJs, and how are you guys like, clearly you're working to negate that, but you know, is it frustrating to see those listicles come out every like festival season?
I mean, initially I did have this like, oh, like don't be tokenizing of just being a woman DJ, but I think there is room and space for that to exist. I think it's needed for visibility's sake. Maybe that's someone's access point for a young person just seeing that for the first time on something as big and amplified as Fader or Rolling Stone or whatever it is. I think having those access points on larger scales is really important to have, but to not tokenize. So that intention is really important from the beginning. And I think, where is your intention coming from? And who's the decision maker in this? Is it diverse? Like there are so many things to ask, but I think there is space for that to exist.
And Angela, you also have a night gig. You started Gush about a year ago, maybe?
Yeah.
It's been about a year you've been throwing Gush. What did you find lacking in the nightlife scene? And like, what sort of drove you to launch this bi-monthly?
It's kind of irregular now, but
I mean,
it gets monthly.
Life.
Yeah, it gets monthly in the summer months. Yeah, it's been going on for a year now. Well, originally, Patty, who I throw Gush with, who's sitting over there. Patty and I always, you know, a lot of my, I kind of hinted at this earlier, a lot of my friendships are project-based, just by nature. Just, I think that's my fault. That's how I am. And when Patty and I started to become friends, we really wanted to work on a project together. I was working at Mission Chinese, and she was working as a lawyer, but also has this vodka company called Material Vodka that I really love. We were just we were trying to figure out an event surrounding material, but then we got really excited about this idea to throw, I think it was Patty's idea, to throw a lesbian party, because there were no good lesbian parties around that were accessible for us. We were kind of trying to concept what that lesbian party might look like. And because I realized myself that I wasn't going to a lot of lesbian parties, there was, one, a need for it, and two, a need for it for a type of party that I think any of my friends, whether they're lesbian or queer or non-gender conforming, somewhere for us to go that was newer than some other parties that have been going on in Williamsburg, but been going on for years and just didn't have, like, I think, a new point of view. So we got excited about this idea about throwing a party that represented POC, women identifying people, and a lot of that was because initially when we were talking with our friends about what type of party, or like what type of party we should throw, what type of lesbian party, a lot of names were thrown out to me, and I noticed that they were all these lesbians that were not POC, and women that I feel like they get a lot of attention, or I see their names out a lot. And so that kind of bothered me, because another aspect of Gush that we wanted was for it to be interdisciplinary and intersectional. So that meant the crowds that, over time we realized, because it was interdisciplinary, we had a lot of crowds that hadn't met each other before. Often whenever we throw a Gush, there are lots of people that I've never seen before, and I'm like, where did these people come from? And it's because we selectively choose people that maybe aren't a part of nightlife, and they all come from different professions. Maybe they work at museums, or someone's a poet, or maybe someone is a DJ, different types of artists or chefs. And then you get a really diverse crowd, both with their ethnic backgrounds, but then also what they do for a living. And then you end up meeting a lot of just really cool people. And then one other aspect about Gush we're very militant about is what we're calling like a reverse economic pricing system. So it's $5 for women or people that identify as women, or non-binary, or queer, and then $10 for gay men, and then $75 for straight men, because we didn't want it to be voyeuristic in any way.
Someone paid $75.
Not yet. I really want that to happen.
Can I Venmo you?
Yeah.
At the door.
That would be a really a huge success.
I got a coupon code.
Yeah.
There's 3 of us. Groupon. I got a Groupon.
But it's been really successful so far, and we like to do the party in different sites. And the idea behind that too is that we want to decolonize these spaces with our party. And then it becomes really memorable for every guest, because maybe if they've been a few weeks ago, we threw one at this bar called Honey's in Bushwick, and I've been there plenty of times for different events. And that was actually the most quote unquote regular space we've thrown it in. And it's memorable because then we know what that party was like. That was a sea of people that we've never seen.
It was poppin'.
Yeah, Christine
It was
there.
crazy.
So it's fun. We want to throw one on a boat in a couple weeks. We threw one in Fire Island, which is really known to be a white gay male space, and that ended up being really fun. At the end of there was a performance art festival called BAFO, and it was a full week and weekend, and at the end of the weekend we threw our party, and it ended up being the most diverse and really fun, and the crowd's really always respectful, and it's just really sweet. But it also has this intellectual air to it. I don't know why, but everyone's just really they party, but they're kind of on good behavior, but people do want to make out. It's a good vibe.
Yeah. Forgot my question. Okay, here's my question. So considering your day gigs and your night gigs, I guess, which part of your brain do you shut off? How do you transition from the two? Do you even transition? Because like you said, you're slacking throughout the day. I don't know, is one seem more relaxing than the other? I feel like I work with a lot of older women who are I have 2 kids. When I come to work, this is my time to chill, so versus going home to their kids. So, is your day gig chiller than your night gig? Are they all exhausting?
It's all exhausting, but I'm a Gemini, so I get bored really easily. Also, just my personality.
Shout out to Gemini season.
Yeah. My birthday's tomorrow.
Stand up. Oh.
Gemini.
But yeah, I mean, even just my career path, I was always all right, I'm a little bored, so what can I do on the side? And I think just having this balance is nice, where it's everything from logistics, which is very production oriented, very dry information, come at this time. But then I'm also designing experiences, which are based from things parties that I throw or things that I'm invited to. I get inspired by that. So it kind of expands on my creative brain. So that's kind of my creative side, which I don't define myself as an artist, but I love working and supporting artists. So then that's where I have a lot of patience too. So that's when working with artists who are I'm answer your text, you need to talk to me right now to make this decision. But that's just a personality trait. Like I'm just really patient with people and creative people specifically, to just give them everything they need to just do their job and like make this thing come to life or play music, and that's their career path. So I just love working with artists, and that's just, I don't know, it just kind of activates all sides of my brain, logistically, creatively, emotionally, as like a support system to people. I just know that that's what I like and need in my career and passions. So it's nice to have it in a ball of sorts.
And Angela, so I guess you've gone from like working the line, which is pure like time and military precision and like this fire now, to like being, I mean, I've like worked in a couple of restaurants myself. You've gone from like managing the line, expediting, I'm sure, to being the face of a restaurant and creating the merch, the language, the culture of the space, to now your role at the Standard. I guess what would have been the shifts along the way that have like inspired and like fired different parts of your brain? And is one more, I don't know, like, do you miss firing a line, you know, in your creative direction role now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've done that for so many years. I was working on lines for, like in kitchens for 10 years. And I'm just excited about this next phase. I think there will probably be periods where I do. There's something about, you know, having a day and a project that's just like being successful at service and that running really smoothly. That's really satisfying. And also this idea that you can have a specific type of day or night in a restaurant, and then it's just performative, and then you do it all again the next day. And if there are errors, you can just actively fix those. Like if there was something problematic the night before, the next night you can just make a new rule. And well, as a leader, like for me as executive chef, I'd make a new rule and we're like, we're not doing it that way. And then you just see the results really quickly. So that was really fun. But I think why I ended up naturally gravitating towards this type of job I have now is because I felt like there was also some sort of limitation to only performing in one space every night. And what I really liked about doing things like pop-ups and getting really good at it and doing theme nights at the restaurant, like one night for Halloween, we, as a Chinese restaurant, dressed up as a prime rib restaurant. And we were all, yeah, like it was really crazy. Like we did a full new menu. Like my staff was dressed up in like a tuxedo look. I did like a giant shrimp cocktail. It was just like very themed. And I realized that satisfied so much of the things I was interested in, throwing parties and creating a theme and doing new food and different food. I was just so hungry to keep working sort of outside of that realm as well, but symbiotically. And so this was a natural gravitation, I think, where, you know, when you're asking what Christine's life is, you know, day versus night, I just thought about myself as well, where there isn't, it doesn't really change, and it hasn't changed for a while. Like everything that I work on now, if it's event-based, they're all related, because what I'm trying to do with my new role, and specifically I chose my title, this is what I wanted, my motive was to work towards in the food industry, is to really create a new language around what food is in our daily lives. It's really powerful, we all relate to it, so inherently it's based in culture. And I think that's really important. I think that a lot of chefs that I really respect are making food that's personal identity driven. And so their food then inherently is political. Art is political. And then I think food is an art expression. And so the work that we're making is political, or should be, or can be. And you know, it sounds really heavy, but that can be as loose as, you know, working with, for me, what I'm doing now is like, small parties that I'm doing too with the Standard are things like working with this gay Asian nightlife crew called Bubble Tea, and there's a jacuzzi at one of our club spaces called La Bain, and we're gonna turn that jacuzzi into a hot pot, like have objects that look like hot pot ingredients, like fish cake and mushroom, and that for them is something that there's a lot of people in their crew that are artists. They're making that, and then I'm doing like spa water cup of noodles upstairs. So it could be really simple like that, or it could be really cerebral and like craft driven, and I could do like a 10-course menu, but it's all linked. I think it's the same dialogue, and I think that's what I'm really trying to achieve. So there's like a seamlessness that happens, but that also means that I'm just really crowding myself with lots of work because I'm also part Gemini. I'm a Gemini rising, and so
double shout out.
And so I feel like I'm very much of a busybody as well, and my communications are also really work driven. And so that's just my attitude towards my work, and it makes it really dynamic and fun for me, like in every corner.
It's funny that you say you make a lot of work for yourself.
Yeah. I do.
Well, you know what? It's all of it. It's such a balancing act. And I guess at what point is like, yeah, at what point how do you get other people involved? How do you share the work? And also, how do you step away from the work when, you need a moment?
Yeah.
I know backstage you were like, you started in nightlife. You're like, I can't work till 5 a.m. every night, like hosting for Peanuts. So
that's true.
Yeah, let's talk about like the balance between working in day, working at night, and like taking time for self without using that overused term that everyone uses that I'm not going to say tonight.
For me, I think it's like building process that makes things more efficient. And then like having a really supportive wife, like back there, who's like, give it to an intern. like, why are you doing this right now? Because I also do the merchandising for Discwoman, which is like literally how we sustain our business. So I'm like packing things at like 2 a.m. She's like, shh. Oh my God. But yeah, a lot of it I think is building process and then delegating it. And that's what I'm learning how to do, to be honest. Like Frank and I, we each have like assistant bookers or whatever. But I think it's just like, again, that skill sharing and that building process to then be able to like, all right, you need to do it, or like, you know how to do it. And then giving them that agency to just handle it and learn. And then they're like, all right, off you go. And everything's great. So allowing that growth to ripple out and like not being a control freak is definitely something. But yeah, that's all in a growth process of like scaling whatever you're doing.
And Angela, as you know, you've created your new role, you've been in it for 5 weeks. What does the support system look like for the creative director of food and culture? Like, who's your deputy? Like, what do they have to do?
Yeah, I don't really have that yet. I finally made a list of all the things that I'm doing just for the Standard. It's not even including my own projects, which I did on the side this weekend. Like on Sunday morning, I woke up at 8 and made a list of my personal projects and then banged out a lot of that work for 2 hours quickly while everyone was sleeping. And that's like fun for me because those are the things that I feel like are for me or for my friends. And at the Standard, I just got a shared assistant for the first time. I've never had an assistant. I've had interns before, but I now have an admin assistant, and I don't even really know what to give him because my work is really weird. Like I don't know what to hand off, but I get support that way. But it's also fun because my support system for cooking can happen at each property. Like Becca from Chromat, she's out here too. We're gonna be doing an event where we're making an edible swimsuit together for Miami Swim Week, but we're also with Christine gonna be making a menu because they're hosting a barbecue out there and I'm helping. We're gonna try to create a menu that's, I don't think I even told you guys this yet, but I want it to be sort of inspired by your trip to Vietnam, and I want it to have like barbecue, like Vietnamese barbecue flavors, but I get to work with that kitchen staff team. So that's kind of the ground support there, but I really recently have also really been trying to make some time for myself to be still and be quieter, and that might mean watching a shitload of movies, like movie marathon days, or I just got Movie Pass, and I can't do anything when I'm at the movies. And also, if I'm at home, I can't just like pass out while I watch. I mean, I do, but I also, if I'm at the theater, I can just make that happen. And then me and my girlfriend's here. We've been like playing on Sundays what she called trash team. That means we play sports, but we're kind of shitty at it. So like shooting around a basketball, or like playing pool, or like I want to buy a badminton set. So I feel like that's like fun for me, and I'm trying to get back into my gym routine and haven't done that yet. But these are all things that I think are necessary for someone like me that has to be active while I'm relaxing. That's working for me right now.
So I feel like our definition of like work and careers has obviously shifted over the generations. My family, I'm a first generation American. My mom's here, she's from Trinidad. She really has no idea like what I do in the day to day. And I think how our mothers viewed work and how they made money and sustained the family is very different than I think how we now do it. I guess, has there been a generational divide in terms of the woman's work in your family and like how you guys view work and life? Yeah.
Like I definitely relate.
Yeah.
For the longest time, my parents were like, so what do you do? Actually, my mom's is like, as long as you're eating okay and like sleeping okay, she's fine. But my dad's like, what? But I would just send him articles of like literally what I do, because I could not really define it to them. I grew outside of DC, so it was very like a lot of politicians and government and things like that. So it was very like cookie cutter. So the idea of success was very, in my opinion, a bit like, constructed. And so I was like, I'm moving to New York, goodbye. And I'm just gonna figure this out. But yeah, I think just kind of like redefining of like, okay, I'm doing okay, and this is generally what I do, and here's an article, hopefully you can understand a little bit, ask questions. But idea of success is constantly changing, and you can have various forms of success. Is it being able to travel more, or just like being able to like sustain your rent like month to month, or whatever it is? It's different for everyone, and I think having that generation or my parents understand that is something that I'm still processing with them.
Yeah, I think that, I'm first generation also. And originally when I was working for like a Chinese restaurant, they're like, why are you working at a Chinese restaurant? Like they're in San Jose, and the Mission restaurant that's in San Francisco they did a pop-up, and it's like a carpeted, looks like a Chinese takeout restaurant. They're like, what are you doing? And it had the same kind of language that I had to send them a press packet. And they're like, all right, this seems like if other people think it's cool, then maybe it is.
If it's on the internet, it's legit.
Yeah, that's cool. Bon appetit, that's nice. So they understood in the nascent stages of that job in particular. But the cool thing is my family, thankfully, they're all really into food. And I have 5 brothers and sisters, and they all love to cook. So they understand food trends, and they understand the importance of like classically trained chefs or big name chefs like Daniel Boulud. They know these names. These are household names for them because they're just foodies, which is fun for me. And so also, since I wanted to be a chef since I was a kid, and they all knew that because I'd be helping our babysitter or helping my mom, they're like, oh, you wanted to do this ever since you were a kid. This is great. And so they've always been really supportive, and definitely like all of these other things that I've been incorporating in my work has had to be something that they had to wrap their heads around, like me also talking about my gender identity and including this in my work. It's what's great about that is it's forced them to be really comfortable around that as well, and we can kind of like joke around about these things and make it feel casual, because if they're like joyful parties, it's not heavy. It's not a heavy topic, and it's not like I'm being marginalized as that person, which a mom might fear that like I might have a difficult time navigating in the world because I'm marginalized with like sexuality, for example. But it's freeing to know that I can openly talk to them about it. But that had to come in through confidence with the success of my regular job, which was chefing. And so that was a personal success for me to get their approval, but also come to that point where I think there was like a threshold where then I was killing it, and then I was like, well, also this is my life, and they'd had to be okay with that. And because I was doing well, I'm like, you can't really say anything bad about me because I'm doing pretty okay. And getting to the point where I can like finally fly my parents in from California to see my world. Like I finally got to do that for the first time maybe like 2 years ago. And also measures of success are, am I giving myself vacation time? That's actually vacation time. Going somewhere tropical, not just visiting my family. I think that's key. So that, again, yeah, I definitely agree with Christine that changes and morphs, but I think that's what's exciting about the work that we're doing, because we're constantly pushing ourselves to see like, okay, what's fun and what do we want to do different? Like, for example, something that's fun for me that sort of fell into my lap too is this clothing company asked me to do a design for a swimsuit, and I thought that maybe they'd ask me to do an apron or something like that, but they're like, maybe, would you want to design a swimsuit? And that for me is a measure of success, that like, oh, some people that outside of my sphere and my own comfort zone is asking me to do challenging work that I think will be, maybe take me somewhere else.
So I think I'm going to ask my last question. I always like to leave audiences with like a bit of information, something to look up, something to check out. What are you excited about, and what would you recommend that this awesome audience check out? Whether that's like a mix on SoundCloud, whether that's an art exhibit, what's one thing that's inspiring you that you would like to recommend to our awesome audience?
I think when we first started doing Discwoman, people were like, there's not a lot of women DJs. Like that was kind of the barrier of people not understanding, like there's a plethora and like abundance of like women DJs. People just aren't like booking them. So on our website, there's this page called Mixes, and we're just like compiling mixes from all around the world. I think that that's a nice access point to being like, oh, okay, there's literally talent all over the world. You just have to like look for it and just be active in that. And a lot of that labor is through like Frankie, my business partner, just like scouring like SoundCloud and having conversations. So I think when people think that there's like a lack of something, it's really just the labor hasn't been put in to like find it. So that's been something exciting. Like we're literally booked all the way to like 2019 of just like mixes every single week. So that's like people are coming to us and like, no, please, like share this. So being a platform to be able to do that is really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I've been nerding out myself on different immigrant cuisines, and I think there are basically these are like shout outs that I want to give. One is a group that I love so much that's based out of New York City. It was a business that was formed by a woman that studied performance art, and she originally started this project as an art project where she did grassroots outreach to immigrant women in the 5 boroughs, and she reached out to women that would make excellent instructors, but they weren't professional cooks, and found really great women. And I think they have 11 different women. Most of them are between the ages of 40 to 60, coming from different heritage backgrounds. So they're called League of Kitchens. And so if you want a gift for somebody, I haven't even done a class yet, but I worked collaboratively on an event. But if you look them up, it's really interesting, because I think for me as a cook and a food nerd, I really like when I want to know about why things are built or why flavors built, I would want to ask, say, my friend's Chinese grandmother, like, or mom, why do you do it this way, or why do you ferment it this way? And what's accessible is like, you don't have to have like a Palestinian grandmother that you're friends with, because we might not have one, but you can look them up and take a class with them. And I love their work. I'm obsessed with it. And one time I got to meet all of them at once, and that was like heaven for me. I wanted to ask so many questions. And then just speaking secondly about Palestinian food, there was a Palestinian chef that I really admired. She was actually an artist when I met her, and then turned to become a chef. She's really young. Her name is Amani Ahmed. She did an event where I really got to learn about, as a chef, think about global politics by way of food, because she I've been really interested in Middle Eastern food, but something that was happening in food media was that people kept coining this type of food as just Israeli food, which is really problematic when, it's regional cuisine that also has some sort of intended erasure around Palestinian food. And so she was celebrating her own Palestinian cooking. Her name is Amani Ahmed, but there's also another chef I got to learn about through her. Her name is Reem Asil, and she has a really great cookbook called Palestinian Table. You could probably see it here. And I just got it today, and I've been wanting it for a while, but the flavors in it are just so amazing. And I feel like there's a lot that we can learn about, again, like politics through food. Like, that was really eye-opening for me. But also think about, with me for League of Kitchens, like all of the really beautifully diverse people that make up of the different boroughs. Like, you can go and take a class and then learn about why that woman is there and why there's that, why there's so many, say, yeah, exactly, in different areas, and then where you can buy those ingredients, and then you get to take home recipes. You cook with that woman, feast with that woman, and then you like clean up together, but then learn where you can buy those ingredients. I think that made me really prideful of New York City as well. So just some things to check out.
So we're going to have questions from the audience. Kaylin is here with the mic. Don't be shy.
I'll come all the way around. Just hang tight.
Thank you guys so much. This was such a great talk. Throughout your talk, I noticed that you both occupy these very dichotomous spaces, sort of daytime corporate, DIY, nighttime. But there's a fluidity that you both have in your worlds. And I'm curious as to how both of these worlds influence and inform the other, and then also how that kind of feeds into your political views, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think, well, like for instance, like production into creative and even throwing like a rave or something like that. There's like, it's like building puzzles, and there's structures that need to be there. I think politically, there's so many value systems within Disc Women that I try to like instill in the corporate world, of like security briefings, where you do not gender the people coming in, like use folks. Like, it's just little tweaks here and there that inform the space so much. So I think of it almost like as social sculpture when I'm building these spaces, and even the way I communicate with like an artist. So yeah, I think of it as like puzzles, but there are structures that have to be there in order for it to even work. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that they definitely, this is my first time working for they sort of, the Standard sort of views themselves as like an anti-corporate company, but it's an office, and I walk into an office and have a desk, and we communicate like it's an office with a million emails every day. I'm sort of navigating that myself, like office politics, like refilling the coffee, things like that I just like, I don't know, I feel weird about. But I think the work that I've been doing sort of led into that direction to just be really official about the work that I'm doing. And I'm really excited about that, because that means I can invite these people that I work with that have important shared projects that might be politically driven. I can feed that directly into my work. And I'm very confident in knowing that I was hired to do that very thing and bring that culture. You know, when I got hired, we spoke about, me and the CEO spoke about what that might mean because I originally was maybe going to be a chef at one of their new locations, but then it morphed into, actually now if you want, you could be whatever title you want, but maybe a creative director. That meant that I could continue to do these side projects, but also bring that back into the culture at the hotel, and knowing full well that's mutually beneficial and a business transaction. I'm very aware that it is a business transaction, but the way that I've always worked, talking about trying to make Mission Chinese a queer restaurant, I wanted to make those spaces like more like a better environment for myself foremost. And so that meant bringing in collaborators that are doing important work that I think is fulfilling for myself. And so that meant, yes, I've already reached out to League of Kitchens to do some sort of collab. Can we do it? And it's just a matter of timing, and they're someone that we're gonna work with in the fall. So those are all projects that I've required to bring into my life, but knowing full well that at the helm of a corporation, they wanted to do that, but knowing that that for me means, even though that might sound at first like my issues with maybe joining a restaurant, a hotel brand meant, oh my God, am I super corporate now? It just means that actually what I'm doing is forcing to change the landscape of what restaurants are, what hotels are, and like how they can now be cultural spaces that can bring in people that they might not have worked with before, and so new platforms for people. So I'm forcing that to happen because I want that to happen, and kind of just knocking that idea down and rebuilding it the way that I want.
Any other questions? Solid. All right.
Guess we covered everything.
Yeah. Oops. Wow. Thorough.
My 8 questions were super thorough.
Very thorough. I learned a lot about you.
Yeah, same. Also, side note, like, she's such a beast at conference calls.
What?
My God.
What do you mean?
I mean, Becca was like, you know,
Really? I
on
don't
the same
even know.
call.
Yeah, we were having a conference call about Miami.
I think in the formalities of going from like DIY to like really formal spaces, asking like all the right questions is like so key.
Yeah.
Like people just like, oh my God, she knows like everything that she wants and just needs it like right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think asking the right questions is like out of experience of just like, all right, this is what I need to do my job.
Yeah.
So that's just a side note of like, yo, you're so good.
I'm like, we're not chit-chatting.
Oh, a question.
Hey,
Ooh.
I just wanted to ask, what are you guys most excited about for the future?
Ooh, in general?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
career-wise, professionally, but also in your personal life and how, like, in the world in between of personal and professional.
Sorry, what was the last part? I couldn't hear this motorcycle.
Not just what you're excited about for the future in your professional life, but also in your personal life and how those two might meet, like the space between.
I right away, my answer is that I'm excited about the future for me right now. I have no idea what that's going to look like. I have some idea based on a lot of things that I think you guys could probably think about what that might mean for all the things that I blabbed about. But I like that I don't really know, and I like that it also, the reason why I don't know partially with the standard is I'm going to be working on a lot of projects outside the U.S. They just, for the first time, are going to be doing their first international location in London. So I'm going to spend some time in London, and I'm like, don't know anything about London. I spent last weekend there, and I'm like, I don't know where to go or what's cool or who's cool. Like, I don't know anything, and I feel very New York focused, and I know a little bit about what's cool in LA and the Bay Area and some places, and I like, it's scary to think I don't know, to know that I'm going to be in that space more. And I find myself often being excited about stuff I'm scared of. So I kind of gravitate towards that. Like, can I do that even? And then you end up surprising yourself and then gathering your resources from your friends and then building a new challenge for other people, I think, too. I'll probably ask you to come to London or something like that, you know?
Is that
I
a
need
formal
help.
offer?
Set up
I
the
need
conference
help.
call right
Yeah.
now.
Right?
I guess I'm really excited for 2 things professionally. One, that No Man's Land is out in the world.
Yay. Woo.
Shout out to Laia Garcia, my deputy editor. Shout out to Jaya Pinder, my amazing editorial assistant / intern / manager, apparently. But I'm really excited that No Man's Land is in the world, that it's in your hands. I often have like anxiety nightmares that something went wrong at the printer. Like the freight truck fell off the road. They're not going to arrive in the stores in time. So I'm like, we work on the entire chain of this magazine from idea to distribution, to marketing, to literally dropping off issues at the Strand. So I'm very excited to see it in all of your hands. Personally, I'm really excited to book a vacation. And one more professional thing, I'm really excited that, one, that the wing exists, and two, that I have the ability to work with amazing women and female identifying persons on this publication. I've worked at like some great places, I've worked at some shitty places, but the wing is really like, they're so gung-ho about making this an amazing magazine and working with cool people. And I'm so honored that like I met Angela at like a party, at like a fashion thing, and she was doing food, and I was like, what do you mean you do food? You don't look like I was like, no. And I was like, you work in food? Because I had like worked in restaurants, and restaurant culture is so bro-y. And then I met Angela like downtown, and I was like, oh no, but she like gets it. And then, and then I met Christine. I was doing like a freelance like money gig, like doing interviews for her agency, and I crossed paths with you there, but I had also emailed with you guys about Chromat and fashion things, you know, when I was at the Fader. So I'm excited to sort of bring all of these cool women from all of these cool worlds together in this publication, and I'm happy that it can still be printed twice a year.
Dope. I'm really excited to see more diversity and just like people with decision-making power. Like people who reach out to Discord, like a lot of them are starting to curate festivals, and I'm like, yes, like let's disrupt everything. But yeah, more diversity in the infrastructure itself, not just on the stage, but behind the scenes, to actually make these decisions and make it happen, and provide the resources too to make these things happen. And then just like life and the future. I think this is very like a Saturn return moment, but like just being more confident in like what I can do and taking more risk, so that like not knowing what's gonna happen or what the future is, I just like feel confident. Like whatever the next thing is, I think just like coming to my own in that is something I'm like amidst right now. So yeah, we'll see.
More questions?
Up front, I'm on my way.
Ooh.
I knew they were out there.
They're there.
I was willing to wait.
How do you ladies prepare yourself and build the confidence to take on all of these new endeavors?
How do we build? The question is, how do we build the confidence?
And build the confidence to take on all these new endeavors.
Yeah, I mean, small things. This is really silly, but small things I do. Like today, I did my first like news segment, and I was really nervous about that. But I definitely gave myself some time in the morning to be like, okay, what am I gonna wear? Like small tidbits, and I'm like, I didn't have enough time, so I was like, okay, I'll recycle an outfit, like I'm fine. And then I give myself space. And really, it's kind of funny, but sometimes I'll take an Uber just to take an Uber instead of being on a subway, just to give myself some alone time. And those are like really small opportunities to give myself alone time. I find myself being able to think clearly in regular spaces, like when I'm showering, I'm like, oh yeah, I can figure out how to do these, to figure out this task. There are these like small moments in my day that I relish, or I like to make time for, and often, you know, sometimes it's kind of wasteful, but this is like me time. Like I'll choose to take an Uber and spend the $20 because I'm like, I need an hour to myself today, so I'm just gonna do that in a car. So I just kind of thought micro with your question, like that's how I'll create a little bit of stillness in my life, and like look forward to those moments as well.
A $20 1 hour Uber though? Like, wow. in Mexico City.
I'm like, oh yeah.
Or Vietnam. For me, a lot of it is time management. So like literally my Google Calendar is like task oriented, so I don't forget anything. I know it's just like really mundane, but just like time management is so important to just juggle so many projects. And sometimes just saying no to things that are like really time consuming, that you're just like heart's not in it. And that's just like a gut check thing that I feel sometimes when a project just I'm like not super excited about it. So yeah, sometimes it's just like, all right, I don't think it's gonna work out for this one. So yeah, figure out when to say no and managing your time and like emotional time too was part of it.
Yeah, like to add to that, I feel like I only realized recently that I should just say no to something if I hesitate for a while. Like if it's an ask and it just sits in my inbox, I'm like, and I don't say yes right away, that means I just shouldn't do that. And then that gives me some time to think about myself or watch that movie. I'm like, oh yeah, if I didn't say yes right away, then I probably just don't want to do it. And that gives me more space to think about me time and then, you know, build confidence through being happy. But I'm sure you have some stuff to say, Deidre.
I would say, I mean, making the first issue of No Man's Land, maybe the number one thing that like helped me sort of wrap my head around the project and like gave me a sense of confidence was like a master spreadsheet. Like I'm the queen of like a spreadsheet. I just like to map things out. I might not have all the answers, but I know like, okay, this has to get done. How does this get done? How, like Audrey turned to me and was like, okay, you made a great magazine. How are we gonna distribute it? I'm like, I don't know. You know, I had to like get on a phone with like stores and like a distribution company and like figure it out. And you know, like I think just that sense of like, okay, well it has to get done and there's an answer out there. Just mapping things out definitely helps. I mean, I have like crazy anxiety and I'm always like, but like I'm always like clenching my stomach all day long, but things get done and I'll be like, oh, it wasn't so bad. Like, oh, it's done. So yeah. And my family is super supportive and I work with great people. So that's confidence. Spreadsheets, family, and to-do lists and friends.
Your top 3.
Yeah. Top 5.
Any other dandelions?
Pass that on down.
Oh yeah.
Okay. What advice would you give like your younger self? If you could kind of.
Oh God.
Cute
It
question.
kind of feeds into everything you've kind of been saying, but if you're young.
I'll go first to give the others some time to think. I would say, just because I know what I would tell my younger self, just to be more fearless and to like, I think when I was younger, I felt like things were so impossible and insurmountable. And now I'm just like a bit more like tactical about everything. So I would tell myself like, just like, don't be scared, just like go forth, like stop punking out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that enough time?
I think so. We're both like in our
I'm
heads.
like, I don't know.
Like we just took an edible.
I'd tell her to
and we're,
run.
Like, melting it. Yeah, I think just saying yes and being open to experiences and seeing the world when you can or if you can. I think that's been so formative. Like the first time I was able to like study abroad, it was just little things where I was like, okay, there's things outside of this bubble that I know. There's so much more out there, and I think being able to like just connect with people and experiences, the more you can do that, the more like human you can feel. And I get more excited about like life in general when I travel. So just little things like that have helped me.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about different stages in my life. I think around the time I was 19, I feel like I finally became a lot more expressive to who I am and weirder in a good way. That meant really exploring who I am and who my friends are. And I think if I could have done that even earlier, I probably would have been, I just feel like I would have been having more fun as a kid. I feel like when I have memories of myself at like, I don't know, in the suburbs at like 7, I would be really like bored somewhere.
Are we so serious? I feel like we're the same child.
I was like at home on a Saturday. I liked going to school because it was really social, and then I came from a big family, so that was really social too. But everyone would go and do stuff on Saturdays, and I would be bored on Saturdays. Like, what am I gonna do without all my friends? And I would just be like less. I would tell myself to be like maybe less serious or more, or just get weirder at a younger age. And I think then I did a lot of like cooking exploration and bringing in random neighbors as friends into the house. But I think that there could have been a lot more of that. That would have been a lot more fun. I had a really fun childhood, but I just think that there's maybe because I'm like first generation or something, I could have even been weirder, but not getting into trouble. I don't know. I think that there's, I thought about myself in college too. There was periods where I was really studious and studying abroad, and I'm look back at that like, why was I studying so much? I didn't even get the grades. I just got credit. I could have just been partying.
Could have been raging.
Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of raging, but there's, there was these like moments in my life that I could really singularly point out that I would have wanted to like let loose more, but maybe that's why we're killing it.
We're just really
know.
serious people.
We're really serious, yeah.
Any more? Last call. One. Yay.
More?
This is for Angela, and I'm sorry if you maybe touched on it at the beginning, but I know you talked about how gender identity is obviously such a crucial part of your approach to your work. Was this happening at the Standard already, or was that something you really brought on in your new role?
I brought that on. I mean, I haven't really made a lot of work pertaining to gender identity so much. Maybe in the restaurant sphere, for example, there's a lot of, the Standard has always been pretty diverse and celebrating like queer culture for sure, which is why I think it was an easy way to gravitate into hotels, specifically with this brand. I just feel like I've been so vocal over the past few years about my gender identity they knew they were signing on for a person that would require that in the workplace. And small things that I've done is in my, I think, second day of work, I chose to attend the orientation that like bartenders and bussers go to at our largest hotel in the High Line. And I wanted to just check out the messaging. I wanted to see how they excite people and who's in that crowd, like who's newly being hired. And it was diverse, but it wasn't for me diverse enough. So that was something I noted. And I told the CEO, I'm like, we need to be more diverse because I want that. But I also was excited to notice that to my left, I was sitting next to a gay male. And to my right, I was sitting next to someone who identified as trans. And I noticed that in the messaging, there's no language or direction, as far as I know, in the brand of trying to use gender neutral pronouns. And so that was something that I brought up to the CEO. And I'm really curious to see how that's going to filter into all of the properties. That's going to take forever, I think. But knowing that I am in a place that I can speak up about that and say something is really empowering. And I think, if we're talking about the corporate sphere and if you guys are like in positions where you feel comfortable to do that, I think that might be like, just knowing that I could do that within this brand means that like perhaps other people are also doing that in their corporate environments, which for me is it just means that I think we're going to see a lot of positive change in the upcoming years. So that was something that I require, and I feel like they knew what they were getting when they asked me to be a part of the team.
If there aren't any other questions, one more. All right.
She's like, there are no questions left. Good night.
Do you feel a sense of responsibility to speak your truth or express some of your political ideas through your work?
I think that's pretty intrinsic for all of us, definitely both of you guys. I think my role, and I mean, I think you'll leverage what you can at the Standard, but I think when you're working with an existing brand, I mean, you work with multiple brands, but I think when you're working with an existing brand, you do what you can, I feel like.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
I think to constantly like evolve to and check in with the language, because it's constantly evolving, is really important. Like when we first started Disc Woman, it was like female identified, and now we've transitioned to not even having gender on there. It's just changed over time because there were people that we brought on that were non-binary, and we were like, this is about section, like, can you help us with it? Like, what are your feelings? And they were like, this is terrible. And so it's readjusting our language because our language about identity is constantly changing. And I think having that those moments to like check in with the people around you is really important, if that is part of your ethos and your value system.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm definitely learning every day, even just by the people that I am friends with. So that's something that I want to be more conscientious about. And, you know, these are things that I still struggle with sometimes. You know, like I can't always assume someone's gender identity, for example. But I think in general, it's important for me to speak about my political values because basically it cuts out a lot of bullshit and allows me to feel more purpose-driven. And I realize that being more vocal, so now I continue to, and that's a practice that's new. Like me speaking about all the things I spoke about today, I maybe wouldn't have even foreseen me having a type of like panel discussion like this 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so that constantly means I'm figuring out what I care about and then how to create words and language around that. And it's constant effort. I mean, you work with words all day, and that's something that I still try to practice to become better at.
Are we talking about working with words? I think for my job and my role in communicating my values, it's something that's really not a stretch at the wing, thankfully. Previously, I had freelanced for a while. I worked in cannabis for a while, which was fun and crazy. And before that, I was at the Fader, which was a media company led by like 4 older white guys. And if you go to thefader.com, it's like hot new hip hop and like rap. And I felt like what we were creating didn't reflect the values and the identity from like top down. And it felt like very disjointed. It felt like shilling a thing for an audience and like sort of like puppeteering in a way. And thankfully, the work that I do at the Wing is very tied to the advancement of women and the conversations that happen in the space and the work that we do in the scholarship programs. And I mean, the fact that like we can talk to who we want for this magazine is like a great avenue to like exercise what I believe in and who I want to uplift and the conversations that I want to be had in the space and after you read the magazine. Hope I answered that. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
This was like so chill.